A single container, 5 gallons. It saved more lives than any weapon ever could. They called it the jerry can. And before America figured out how to make them, soldiers were dying, not from bullets, but from something far more silent: fuel starvation. Picture this: North Africa, 1942. The desert stretches endlessly under a merciless sun. British and American tanks sit motionless, engines cold, while German panzers roar across the dunes with perfect precision. The Allies had the firepower, the manpower, the will to fight, but they couldn't move. Their fuel was gone, leaked, evaporated, spilled across the sand from flimsy, unreliable cans that burst open under pressure, cracked in the heat, and left entire battalions stranded in enemy territory. Meanwhile, German forces moved like ghosts through the wasteland, their vehicles always fueled, always ready. They had a secret weapon, and it wasn't a gun. It was a container, a brilliantly engineered, seemingly indestructible fuel can that the British soldiers started calling the jerry can. Jerry being slang for Germans. And it was so good, so devastatingly effective, that Allied commanders became obsessed with capturing them off the battlefield just to keep their own machines running. But here's the shocking part. America, the industrial giant, the arsenal of democracy, couldn't figure out how to make one, not at first. And that failure cost lives, battles, and precious time in a war where every second mattered. So how did a simple fuel container become one of the most crucial pieces of technology in World War II? What made the German design so flawless that even their enemies were desperate to steal it? And how did America finally crack the code, reverse engineer the secret, and mass-produce millions of these life-saving cans that would fuel the Allied victory across Europe and the Pacific? If you're fascinated by the hidden engineering marvels that changed history, make sure to like this video, because what you're about to discover is a story of innovation, desperation, and the tiny details that win wars. Let's rewind to 1936. Germany is rearming. Hitler's war machine is being built from the ground up, and the engineers know something that most people overlook. Logistics wins wars. You can have the best tanks, the fastest planes, the most fearless soldiers, but if you can't get fuel to them, you lose. So the German military commissions a fuel container that must meet impossible standards. It has to be airtight, stackable, durable enough to survive being thrown off a moving truck, light enough for one soldier to carry, and able to hold exactly 20 liters of gasoline without leaking a single drop. The result? A masterpiece of practical design. The German Wehrmachtskanister, the military canister, was born. It had 3 handles, not one. Why 3? Because 2 soldiers could carry one can between them using the outer handles, or one soldier could carry 2 cans, one in each hand. The center handle was for pouring. Genius, simple, efficient. But the brilliance didn't stop there. The can's body was pressed from a single sheet of steel, welded at the seams with an internal air pocket that acted as a cushion during impacts. If you dropped it, the air absorbed the shock. If you threw it, it bounced. The sides had recessed X-shaped indentations that gave the can structural rigidity while allowing it to expand and contract with temperature changes. In the scorching desert or freezing Russian winter, the jerry can flexed without bursting. And the seal? Flawless. A cam lever closure system with a rubber gasket that locked tight with a simple flick of the wrist. No screw caps, no fumbling in the dark. You could open it, pour it, close it, and not lose a single drop of fuel. In a war where fuel was liquid gold, this was revolutionary. Now here's where it gets interesting. The British knew about the jerry can before the war even started. In 1939, an American engineer named Paul Pleiss was working in Berlin. He saw the cans everywhere: military depots, supply trucks, fueling stations. He realized immediately that this design was light years ahead of anything the Allies had. So he did something bold. He bought 3 cans, smuggled them out of Germany through Switzerland, and brought them to British officials in London, warning them, "You need to copy this, now." The British looked at the cans, they tested them, they agreed the design was superior, and then they did nothing. Bureaucracy, complacency, and a stubborn belief that their own equipment was good enough meant the jerry can was ignored. Meanwhile, Germany stockpiled millions of them, preparing for the blitzkrieg that was about to swallow Europe whole. When the war finally erupted, the consequences were immediate and brutal. British forces in France were using flimsy, square-shaped flimsies, thin metal cans with screw caps that leaked constantly, required tools to open, and could only be stacked inefficiently. Fuel convoys became nightmares of waste and delay. Soldiers would open a can to find half the fuel already evaporated. They'd pour gasoline and spill more than they saved. And in combat, where speed meant survival, these failures were deadly. The Germans, they moved like lightning. Their panzers rolled across Poland, France, and North Africa with perfect fuel discipline. Every drop counted. Every can worked. And when British soldiers stumbled across abandoned German supply dumps, they didn't destroy the jerry cans, they hoarded them like treasure. But how exactly did the German can stay sealed so perfectly, even after being battered across thousands of miles of rough terrain? The secret was in the cam lever mechanism. Inside the cap, a spring-loaded pin pressed down onto the rubber gasket, creating an airtight seal that could withstand internal pressure changes. When you flipped the lever, the pin released instantly and you could pour without unscrewing anything. Close it again, and the seal locked tight. It was so intuitive that soldiers could operate it in complete darkness, in freezing rain, under enemy fire. And if you want to discover more untold WW2 stories and deadly hidden technologies, subscribe now, because what you're about to see next will blow your mind. Now let's jump to 1942. America has entered the war, and the fuel crisis is reaching catastrophic levels. U.S. forces are using a ridiculous patchwork of containers. Square cans, round cans, cans with screw tops, cans with crimped seals, even glass bottles in some desperate cases. The waste is staggering. Reports from the Pacific estimate that up to 40% of fuel is lost to leakage, evaporation, and spillage before it ever reaches the front lines. In the desert campaigns of North Africa, the number is even worse. Soldiers are literally watching their lifeline drain into the sand. General George Patton is furious. His tanks are running dry. His supply officers are pulling their hair out. And every time his men capture German equipment, they find those same green steel cans, still full, still sealed, still perfect. Patton demands answers. "Why can't we make these?" he roars. "The Germans figured it out years ago." The problem? America's industrial complex is focused on building tanks, planes, guns, and ships. A fuel can seems trivial by comparison. But the military finally wakes up to the reality. Without fuel, nothing else matters. Orders go out. Reverse engineer the jerry can. Copy it exactly. Mass produce it, and do it fast. American engineers tear apart captured German cans, measuring every angle, every weld, every millimeter of steel thickness. They analyze the handle placement, the internal baffles, the cam lever system. They run stress tests, drop tests, pressure tests, and slowly, painstakingly, they recreate the design. But there's a twist. America doesn't just copy the jerry can, they improve it. The U.S. version is made slightly thicker to handle rougher treatment during mass production. The steel is tempered differently to resist corrosion in saltwater environments, crucial for Pacific Island campaigns. The handle rivets are reinforced. The interior is coated with a special lacquer to prevent rust and contamination. And the production process is streamlined so that American factories can churn them out by the millions. By 1943, U.S. factories are producing jerry cans at a staggering rate, tens of thousands per week, then hundreds of thousands. Eventually, over 21 million cans roll off American assembly lines before the war ends. They're shipped to every theater of war: Europe, Africa, the Pacific, Asia. They fuel the D-Day invasion, the island-hopping campaign, the liberation of France, the push into Germany. But what made the American-made jerry can so strong that it could survive being dropped from planes, run over by tanks, and submerged in ocean water during beach landings? The secret was in the steel itself. American metallurgists discovered that by adding small amounts of manganese and molybdenum to the steel alloy, they could create a can that was both lighter and stronger than the original German version. The metal could bend without breaking, absorb impacts without denting, and resist rust even after prolonged exposure to salt water. Soldiers loved them, mechanics loved them. Even the Germans, when they captured American supplies, grudgingly admitted the U.S. version was just as good, maybe better. The jerry can became ubiquitous. It was no longer just a German innovation, it was the Allied standard. And here's the kicker. After the war, the jerry can didn't disappear. It became the global standard for fuel transport. Militaries around the world adopted it. Civilian industries copied it. Today, if you see a portable fuel container anywhere on Earth, chances are it's based on that same 1930s German design, perfected by American engineering during the most desperate years of World War II. But let's go deeper. What was happening on the front lines when these cans finally arrived in mass quantities? How did soldiers actually use them, and why did they make such a difference in the final push to victory? Normandy, June 6, 1944. D-Day. The largest amphibious invasion in history. Thousands of ships, planes, and landing craft converge on the beaches of France. And behind the chaos, behind the gunfire and explosions, there's a quieter battle being fought. The battle to keep the machines running. Tanks, trucks, jeeps, generators, all of them gulping fuel at an insane rate. Supply officers are frantic. How do you fuel an entire army in the middle of a war zone with no infrastructure, no pipelines, no gas stations? The answer? Jerry cans. Mountains of them. Stacked on landing craft, carried by hand across the beaches, loaded onto trucks that race inland under fire. Each can holds 5 gallons, just enough to keep a jeep running for hours or top off a tank's reserve. Soldiers don't need pumps, hoses, or funnels. They grab a can, flip the lever, pour, and move. Fast, efficient, reliable. And because the cans are stackable, supply depots can organize them in tight, orderly rows, maximizing space on crowded ships and narrow roads. Because they're airtight, fuel doesn't evaporate during long transports across the Atlantic. Because they're durable, they survive the rough handling of wartime logistics. Every single detail matters. Every improvement saves time, and time saves lives. As the Allies push deeper into France, the fuel situation becomes even more critical. Patton's Third Army is racing across the countryside, moving faster than anyone anticipated. His tanks are outrunning their supply lines. Fuel trucks can't keep up. So engineers devise a desperate solution: the Red Ball Express, a massive convoy system that runs non-stop, day and night, hauling supplies from the beaches to the front lines. And what are they hauling? Jerry cans. Thousands upon thousands of them, riding in the backs of deuce-and-a-half trucks, keeping Patton's war machine alive. But here's something most people don't know. The jerry can also saved lives in a completely unexpected way. Medics discovered that the cans, when emptied and cleaned, made perfect containers for transporting water, blood plasma, and medical supplies. The airtight seal kept everything sterile. The handles made them easy to carry under fire. The durability meant they didn't break when dropped. Field hospitals across Europe and the Pacific started requisitioning empty jerry cans for non-fuel purposes, turning a fuel container into a multi-purpose lifesaver. So what secret engineering feature inside the jerry can allowed it to be used for so many different purposes without contamination or failure? The interior lacquer coating was key. Unlike bare steel, which could rust or react with different liquids, the lacquer created an inert barrier that prevented chemical reactions. This meant a can that held gasoline one day could be thoroughly cleaned and safely used for water the next. The coating also prevented fuel from degrading or picking up metallic tastes, which was crucial for long-term storage in harsh climates. And then there's the Pacific Theater, island-hopping campaigns where every ounce of weight matters because everything has to be carried ashore by hand or dropped from planes. The jerry can's lightweight and extreme durability made it indispensable. Pilots would strap them into cargo planes and kick them out over drop zones, and the cans would hit the ground, bounce, and stay sealed. Marines would wade through chest-deep surf carrying cans above their heads, knowing that no matter how rough the landing, the fuel inside would be safe. One Marine Corps engineer later recalled, "We'd hit the beach and the first thing we'd do is set up a fuel dump with jerry cans. Didn't matter if it was raining, if the sand was blowing, if the enemy was shelling us. Those cans never let us down, not once." But the real test came during the Battle of the Bulge, Hitler's last desperate gamble in the winter of 1944. German forces launched a surprise offensive through the Ardennes, pushing deep into Allied lines, cutting off supply routes, and surrounding entire American divisions. Fuel became the difference between survival and surrender. Tanks couldn't move without it. Trucks couldn't evacuate wounded soldiers. Generators couldn't power field hospitals. And once again, the jerry can proved its worth. Supply officers organized airdrops, rigging cans with parachutes and hurling them out of cargo planes over besieged positions. Soldiers on the ground would hear the roar of engines overhead, see the parachutes blossom against the gray sky, and know that relief was coming. They'd crack open the cans, pour fuel into frozen engines, and keep fighting. One officer wrote in his diary, "Without those cans, we'd have been done for. The cold would have killed us before the Germans did." So here's the big picture. The jerry can wasn't just a container. It was a force multiplier. It turned fuel, an invisible, unglamorous resource, into a weapon as powerful as any tank or bomber. It allowed armies to move faster, strike harder, and sustain longer campaigns than ever before. And it did all of this through brilliant, simple engineering. No electronics, no moving parts beyond the lever. Just steel, ingenuity, and an obsessive attention to detail. And the legacy? After the war, surplus jerry cans flooded the civilian market. Farmers used them for tractors. Truckers carried them for emergencies. Off-road adventurers relied on them for desert crossings. The design became so universal that jerry can stopped being a brand name and became a generic term like Kleenex or Band-Aid. Even today, modern militaries still use cans based on the original 1930s design. Sure, there are plastic versions now, polymer blends that are lighter and rust-proof, but the shape, the handles, the cam lever closure, it's all still there. Refined but fundamentally unchanged. Because when something works this well, you don't mess with it. But what about the German engineers who designed it in the first place? What happened to them after the war? Surprisingly, most of them faded into obscurity. The jerry can was such a simple, practical invention that it didn't make headlines. There were no patents to fight over, no fame to claim. It was just effective. And in the brutal calculus of war, effectiveness mattered more than glory. American engineers, too, rarely got credit. The men and women who reverse-engineered the design, improved the metallurgy, and scaled up production to 21 million units, they were anonymous heroes of the home front, working in factories and labs far from the battlefields. Their names aren't in history books, but their work saved countless lives and helped win the war. And that's the strangest, most beautiful part of this story. A fuel container, something so mundane, so easy to overlook, became one of the most important pieces of equipment in the entire conflict. It didn't fire bullets, it didn't drop bombs, it just held 5 gallons of gasoline and refused to fail. And that's the next time you see a red plastic gas can in someone's garage or a green steel canister at a military surplus store, take a second look. That design has a lineage stretching back to Nazi Germany, perfected under pressure by American engineers, tested in the deserts of North Africa, the beaches of Normandy, the jungles of the Pacific, and the frozen forests of Belgium. It's a piece of history hiding in plain sight, a testament to the fact that wars aren't just won by heroes and generals, they're won by the people who make sure the engines keep running, the lights stay on, and the fuel gets where it needs to go. The jerry can did exactly that. And it did it flawlessly, under the worst conditions imaginable, for 6 years of total war. If you loved discovering the deadly secrets of WW2 weapons and the hidden engineering marvels that changed history, make sure to subscribe. A new video revealing even more untold truths is coming very soon. Because sometimes the smallest things make the biggest difference.